Hi everybody, welcome to Atenas Crochet. In today's tutorial, we're going to be working on these beginner mittens. They are a really quick and easy project to make, so let's go grab some materials and let's get started. So I'm going to use 2 skeins of the wool-like yarn, and it's a size 1 fingering yarn, and a G-hook, and that's 4.25 millimeters. And you can make this mitten in any size you want. So just measure the widest part of your hand, and you're going to double that. So for me, it's 3 inches, so I need to make a 6-inch chain. But since I'm making these tiny ones for my little 3-year-old, I just need to make a 4-inch chain because her hand is 4 inches or 2 inches across, excuse me. So double that, and it's 4 inches. So I'm going to start with a chain of 26 chains. So we're going to make a slip knot, and I'll adjust my camera here so you can see. So we have our slip knot, and we're going to start to chain. If you don't know how to chain, grab this bottom thread, and I like to grab the knot, and then you just wrap your yarn around your hook, and you pull it through the loop. So wrap around and pull through the loop. So this is chain number 3, 4, and then you just kind of move your hand to adjust. 5, 6, and we keep going until you reach the length that you need. So for my kid, it's a 4-inch chain. For me, it's a 6-inch chain, and if I were to make these for my husband, it would be an 8-inch chain. So I'm just going to keep crocheting until I get my chain. So this is the 4 inches. I know it's 26 chains because I made the other little glove earlier, because we're going to fold this in half, and that's going to be our mitten. So just remember the number of chains that you made when you make the first mitten so that you make the same number for your second mitten. So now I pinch my very last stitch, and I'm going to chain 1 more. So this is going to end it in an odd number, but we need this chain so that when we go into the second stitch from the hook, which is what we're going to be crocheting in, we insert our hook, grab some yarn, and pull it through. And now we're going to make a slip stitch. So see how we have our 2 loops? We're going to go through the first loop, and that was a slip stitch. So you're going to need to make this stitch a lot. So that's our slip stitch in the second stitch from the hook. Now we're going to the next stitch, and we're going to wrap our yarn around our hook, insert our hook into the second stitch, pull it through, and now we have 3 loops on our thread, or on our hook, sorry. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, and that is called a half double crochet stitch. So we're going to the stitch right next to that, and we make another slip stitch. So I'll close out my slip stitch. In the next stitch, we're going to yarn over, and right in this next stitch, we're going to make a half double crochet. So I've got my 3 loops, I yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So in the next stitch, insert our hook and make a slip stitch, and then a half double crochet in the stitch after that. So we're just going to be alternating for the rest of the chains in the row between a half double crochet and a slip stitch. So I'll keep working these stitches until I get to the end of the row. So I'm at my very last stitch, and at the end of every single one of these rows, you're going to end with a half double crochet because you had to make your initial chain in even numbers. So you'll always end in a half double crochet. So now we finish that one, and we chain 2. And now we're going to turn our work around, and in this stitch right next to our chain, you see it? We're going to make a slip stitch. So I insert my hook as soon as I can grab all my yarn. Let me see if I can show you the top part. So you're going to go through both of these little loops at the top part. There we go. So go through both of those because that is the stitch, and you're going to pull some yarn through, and we're just going to pull it through that first loop for our slip stitch. In the next stitch, so right next to it, we're going to make a half double crochet. So make sure you keep these stitches nice and loose because it's going to make it a lot easier to crochet. So then the next stitch is a slip stitch, and then a half double crochet, and we're basically repeating the previous row on this row. So you start with a slip stitch at the beginning of every row. Your very first stitch is a slip stitch. Your very last stitch of the row is going to be a half double crochet. So just keep alternating between slip stitch and half double crochet until you get to the end of the row. So I've gotten to the end of my row, and it looks like I only have the one stitch left, but in this stitch it's my slip stitch, and right here in this little chain, and this is the only row you'll have this problem in, so in this chain is where I'm going to make my last stitch, which is my half double crochet stitch. It's a lot easier to see it in every other row after this one. So now we chain 2, turn our work around, and we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing. So our very first stitch is a slip stitch, our next one is a half double crochet, and so forth and so on. Don't forget that you need to end your row in a half double crochet. If you've skipped any of them or you end up in a slip stitch, go back and check your stitches, because chances are you doubled up on something, which is what I do. I usually double up on my half doubles for some reason, or you skipped a stitch. Another thing that I didn't mention about sizing is the size of your yarn will affect the size of your pattern or your finished project. So if you're using a bigger yarn than me, definitely measure. So don't use number of chains, measure everything and make sure that you make it the size that you need. So like this is going to be a lot smaller for me than somebody using a size 4 yarn. Okay, so we're going to keep crocheting that same pattern until we get to the top, till we get the length or the height that we need. So from the bottom of your hand to the tip of your finger is what you want to measure, and then add about a 1/4 inch. I've got more information about sizing on the written pattern, so check that out. It's going to be in the blog or in the description box below. I'll put the link to my blog. It's a free pattern. Go ahead and just, check it out if you want to. You can copy and paste it onto a Word document or take a picture of it, whatever you want. So I have made the length that I need for my kid. See, I'd already previously made the mittens, so I just kind of measured it with the size of the mitten I already have. So now we're going to make the cuff. So for the cuff, if you want to change colors, switch yarns now. Otherwise, chain 2, turn your work around, and we're going to work everything in double crochets. So let me get a little closer. So in this very first stitch, we're going to make our first double crochet right in here. So yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, pull your yarn through, and then yarn over, pull through 2, and pull through 2. Don't worry, I will slow it down. So yarn over, and then let's go into this next stitch. Insert your hook, and then you're going to grab some yarn and pull that through your stitch. You're going to have your 3 loops like with a half double crochet, but you're going to yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So you're going to have 2 left, yarn over, and pull through the last 2 loops. So let's do this in every single stitch of this row. We're going to make a double crochet. So I've reached the end. So I've got all of my double crochets. So now we chain 2, we're going to turn our work around, and we're going to be working on the posts this time. So here's my post. We're going to yarn over, we're going to go behind the post and push it towards the front. So this is a front post double crochet. So pull your yarn through and you finish your double crochet. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So now we're going to yarn over again, and we're going to come in from the back of the project and push the post backward. This is called a back post double crochet. You're going to see this a ton in all of the brims that I make and all of the cuffs I make. I love this. So that's a back post double crochet. In the next one, we're going to go yarn over and push the post forward. So we make another front post double crochet, and we finish our double crochet, yarn over, go into the next one and push the post back. So we're going to be alternating between back post double crochets and front post double crochets until we get to the end of the row. And it's going to create a really pretty brimmed look, or a ribbed look, that will just make your project look a lot nicer. And it's really easy to make, so. Okay, so I'm at the end, and this one's kind of funky. So yarn over and work your last post, whether it's a front post or a back post. Just work the post the way you need to. And then in this space between your last post and this chain, you're going to make a double crochet. So just yarn over, insert the hook into that chain space, and then finish your double crochet. This is going to keep your count even. If you don't do that one, you're going to start to decrease your work. So it's going to look like a triangle. Alright, so chain 2, and we're just going to be extending these. So this is see all our front post and back posts? So our first one is a back post double crochet, so make it a back post double crochet. So insert your hook towards the front. I don't know if that's a little cleaner to see. And then it's got the top part of the double crochet and the bottom part, so go to the top part of it. and finish off your double crochet. Now in this next one, we're going to make a front post double crochet. So go into the top of the stitch and make your front post. The next one is a back post double crochet, so make it as a back post double crochet. And we're just going to keep working this way until we finish the row. Make this, this is the cuff of your mitten, so make it as wide as you want. Since this is for my little one, I don't need it to be too wide, so I'm just going to stop there. So once I finish this row, I'm done with my cuff. If these gloves were for me, I would probably make another 2 rows, but I like a really wide cuff on my mittens. So that is entirely up to you. You can make the cuffs as big as you want. So I've reached the end, and I'm at my very last stitch, and I'm going to make my double crochet to finish my row, and I am done. So I'm going to cut a big tail end because we're going to fold this in half, and this is going to be the body of our mitten. So I need a big piece of thread. So I'm using both of my threads together and just going to sew them in together the same way. You can also use string. You can use a different yarn if you want to. That's entirely up to you. But we're going to be sewing here. So just pull that through. So I'm going to pull my yarn out from my loop. There we go. And I'm going to set that aside. So now what we're going to work on is the thumb. So the thumb is a little bit different because we're going to be working in the round. So I'm working this for a kid, so I'm just going to work the really basic one. I will explain to you how to make it for adults as well. So we're going to start with a magic circle. So wrap the yarn around your fingers like you're making a slip knot. But when you grab your yarn and pull it through, you're not going to tighten everything. Instead, pull the yarn out from your fingers and then just pinch all of the yarn together. Pinch it tight because we're going to be making a slip stitch, or a chain, sorry. So we're going to chain 1, and that's a magic circle. So now we're going to make 7 single crochets. So I'm going to work on my 7 single crochets inside the magic circle. So you're going to do the same for an adult one. So if I were to make these for myself, I'd also make 7. If I were to make the thumbs for my husband's mittens, I want to make 8. So it's going to be 8 single crochets at the magic circle instead of 7. So I'll finish up my 7 here. And then there's also increases for the adult ones, which I'll tell you about here in just a second. Okay, so I've got my 7 single crochets, and I'm going to pull on this tiny tail end and tighten up the thumb. I'll also tighten it up again right before I sew it on and thread in the ends. Okay, so in this very first little stitch right here, we're going to insert our hook, and we're going to make a slip stitch. And by now you should be very familiar and very comfortable with slip stitches. So we make a slip stitch, and that is our first little row. So this, we're going to chain 1, and in this row I'm going to, okay, so this tiny stitch right next to where we made our chain, I always crochet into that one because it makes it just a little bit wider on the thumb. So just make a single crochet in every one of the stitches. If I were to make this for an adult, I'd make this 1 single crochet, and in the stitch next to it I would make 2 single crochets. And in the 3rd stitch I make 1 single crochet, and then in the stitch after that 2 single crochets. But I'm making it for my kid, so it's just 1 single crochet in every stitch all the way around. So here I've reached the end, and see I've got this little last stitch. I'm going to make a single crochet in there. There we go. And now in this stitch right next to it, this first one right here that we started the row with, I'm just going to slip stitch. And I have closed my round. There we go. So I chain 1, and I do it all over again. So 1 single crochet in every stitch. And this row I'm working on right now, I'm calling this one row number 2. So make a total of, for a small child, you're going to need about 8 rows. So make 8 rows, and then we're going to make what's called increases in rows 9 and 10, and that's to make this part wider. So see, I've got my 8 rows, so I'm going to chain 1, and this is going to be an increase. So we're going to make a single crochet, here we go, in this chain, in this first stitch. In the second stitch, we're going to make 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So I made 2. In the 3rd stitch, we make 1 single crochet. In the next one, we make 2 single crochets. and so forth and so on. So this is what I was saying we were going to be doing if we're making adult thumbs, like for the mittens. This is what you would do in that very first row. So after you make your 7 stitches in the magic circle, this is what you would do in the row right after. Alright, so I've reached the end, and I've got this little stitch left right here, so I'm going to slip stitch, close my round, and do it one more time. So chain 1, and we're going to do it all over. So 1 single crochet, and then 2 single crochets, and 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets, and so forth and so on until I finish my row. And what this is going to do, it's going to make the thumb part wider, so that when we attach it to the mitten, there's just a little bit more space for the person to move their thumb around inside the mitten, so it's not super tight. So I'll finish this up real quick. Let's see, I've got this one and 2, and there we go. And I'm just going to close up my round. So I'll slip stitch in here, and I'm done. So that is how you make the thumb part. So I'm not going to leave a very long tail because I just need to weave it in, because I'm going to be sewing in my thumb with the mitten. So just grab a yarn or a tapestry needle, whatever you prefer. Any kind of needle that fits your yarn will work just fine. So just pick whichever needle you want, get that threaded, and I'm just going to weave in my ends. So I'm just going to sew it in kind of like a square pattern, just to hide in the little tail ends of the yarn, and that'll also keep it from unraveling. So I'm just going to make a little square shape right here, and we're going to do this to all of the ends of yarn in any and all of our projects. So I'll do that with the other remaining pieces of yarn that I have, the other little ends I have here for the mittens as well. So once it's nice and hidden, I kind of just pick a long space in my work to just kind of run my needle through. I don't know, maybe about 1 inch to 2 inches. And that way when I pull my yarn out, I'll give it a little pull, and then I'll cut that. And that way when I pull on my project, it hides the rest of the tail end. So I'll go through and weave in the other ends of the yarn on my thumb once I finish the project. And there you go. So that is the thumb. So now we need to attach everything and sew our mitten together. So let me grab everything I need. Here, I'm going to tighten this. You can tighten up the top part of your of the thumb as well. So if you see that it's a little open, just pull on that thread and you'll be able to tighten it, and then you can weave in your end and it shouldn't be a problem anymore. So we're going to thread our needle with the really long piece of yarn or thread that we're going to be using to sew our mitten together. Alright, so I've got that threaded. And we're going to fold our mitten in half. Make sure your cuffs and everything are matched up. And I'm just going to sew around so that it crosses on the top part. So I want my thread to go over and across like this. So I'm just going to go through and sew this up. And don't sew it all the way across. Sew it up about 1/3 of the way into your mitten. You can use a marker if you want to. You can measure it so that it's exact if you're going to be making these as a gift. Just measure about 1/3 of the mitten, put some kind of marker on it, use soap if you want to. Just grab a bar of soap and draw a little line on it with the soap. That way when you wash it, it'll wash right out. Or use some kind of marker, a tag, anything you want to use. So I'm just going to use my other mitten just to make sure that both of these match. So I need about 2 more stitches. This mitten I'm working on is also like a lot cleaner and neater because my kid found her mitten and she's been playing with it all morning. Okay, so I've gotten my 1/3 of the way in, and now I'm just going to thread through one of the sides of the mitten, and this is so that I can be at the top see, I only did the one side. So I can be at the top of the thumb, because I'm going to be sewing it down and around. So it just makes it a lot easier, and that way I don't have to cut my thread so many times. So I'll measure up to where the top of the thumb is, and I'm going to sew one side of the thumb, because you don't want to sew the thumb shut. So just pick one side and start sewing it through, and hold it tightly so that it doesn't fall out of your hand. Okay, we got this fixed. There we go, let's line it up. I'll open the thumb part here, and there we go. So I'll just keep sewing this until I get to the very bottom of the thumb, and then we're going to sew it kind of in a bit of a crisscross pattern at the bottom. So if you use the written pattern, this part was incredibly difficult for me to explain on paper. So if you're watching this video because you read the pattern and you had no idea what I was talking about, this is it. It's really not that difficult. I just had no way of explaining it in the video, or in the written pattern, sorry. Okay, so at the base, I'm just going to make a bit of an X here. So I'm going to sew into the bottom, and I'm going to sew everything into that same stitch, just to make sure everything is really well attached. See, and I'm just kind of making a couple of stitches going from one side of the mitten to the other, so that I've now worked my way around to the other side of the thumb. And now we're going to do the same. So I'll line up my edges and then just get those sewed up together. Alright, so I worked my way around. Now we're at the very top of the thumb part. So we're going to do kind of a bit of a crisscross, kind of somewhat like we did at the bottom part. So I'm just going to insert my hook here from one side across to the other side of the thumb, and then go one more time over here, and then go across, and then go in the other direction. And that way I make sure I've completely closed off the thumb part, so that it, because if it makes a little tear or anything, it's going to open up the rest of your mitten. So we don't want that. Okay, there we go. Our thumb is attached. Now I'm just going to work my way all the way up to the top of the mitten, and I'll show you how to make it round here at the top, because you can just kind of close it up if you want to, and it'll be kind of a square mitten. Some people like square mittens, but I kind of like my mittens really round at top, so I will round out the top part. So if you want to make them perfectly round and you want both mittens to be completely perfectly matched, then you might want to grab a bowl or a glass or something round so that you can use to measure it, and a drawing tool. I highly recommend you just use soap as your drawing tool, so grab a bar of soap and then you can draw, and that way you can make it nice and round. I'm just going to eyeball it and just kind of go across. So it doesn't have to be perfectly round. If you just go make a straight line across, that'll suffice. So I'm just going to make a couple stitches in and out here. So instead of going up and across like the way I was going, I'm just going to go in and out when I'm sewing. So in through one side and then go out through that same side. So I'll do a few of those just to make sure that that's going to be nice and secure. And then when I get to the top part, I'll just close that off the same way I was closing off the sides. So you can go like this, or I prefer to work just up and across like this. That just makes it a lot easier for me to sew it. So this tail end, I'm just going to put it here and just sew it in, instead of weaving it in, because it's going to be in the inside of the mitten. So, and my kid is growing really fast, as all 3-year-olds do, so she's not going to be wearing these mittens for very long. So I'm not terribly worried about them. So I'll just hide this thread really quickly, and then when I get to the other side, I'm also going to try to make it a little bit more round. So as I approach it here, there we go. So I'm just going to make another diagonal across, get that all sewed up, and all we have left to do is just finish sewing this, knot it up at the end, weave in our ends, and we are done. So I finished sewing everything. I just have to weave in some ends, but I can do that in my own time. So I'm going to flip my glove, or my mitten. I keep calling them gloves, I'm sorry. So my mitten inside out. If you have a hard time flipping the thumb part inside out, you can use a pen, a pencil, or something, a straw, anything to push out the thumb. Or you can just ask your kid to put the gloves on. Or, I mean, in your case, if you're making them for yourself, you could just put them on. And there we go. So these are our little mittens. So it's a really quick and easy project. It didn't take me very long to get both of these done. Hope you give these a try. Let me know how they work out. And that's it, guys. If you have any questions or any comments, leave them down below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so that I know that you like this kind of stuff, and I will keep making this kind of content for you. Give it a thumbs up if you like this video. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm at mode.bespoke. So follow me there, ask me questions if you want to, let me know what kind of patterns you want to see, and thanks for watching.